I've always loved the hours after school. When the lights dim, the voices fade, and the library becomes what it was always meant to be. A sanctuary. The students disappear. The noise quiets. And for a while I can hear myself think again. That's when I usually walk the aisles in silence, running my fingers over the book spines like they're old friends. No one watches me there. No one sees me. Until he did. His name was Aiden. 17. Tall. Sharp around the edges in a way that made people nervous, not cruel, just unreadable. He wasn't a regular. Most boys like him don't come here unless they're forced. But that day he stayed. Not with a friend. Not for detention. Just stayed. I was shelving returns when I noticed him. Back corner. Tucked between the poetry and mythology section. A place no one goes unless they're trying not to be seen. He looked up as I passed. Met my eyes. Held them just a second too long. Didn't know the library was open after hours, he said. Technically it's not, I replied. He smirked. Then I'll be quiet. And he was. Too quiet. I told myself not to think about it. That he was just a kid. Just curious. Just bored. But when I walked past again, he was still there, still reading but not turning pages. And when I stopped to reshelve a book, I felt his gaze before I even looked up. There was something about it. Not disrespectful. Not innocent either. Just seeing me. Not as Mrs. Ellison the librarian. But something else. Something I hadn't been in a long time. He stayed again. 3 days later. Same corner. Same time. Same silence. I pretended not to notice, the way you pretend not to feel the pull of something sharp just beneath your skin. But I watched. Of course I watched. He didn't read this time. He wandered. Let his fingers brush the edges of shelves, paused longer at the banned books display, traced the spine of a worn copy of Lolita with his thumb. I told myself not to read into it, but when he reached the front desk, my desk, I couldn't ignore it anymore. He stood there, quiet, looking at the way I moved behind it, the way I tucked receipts away, the way I pushed in the bottom drawer, and turned the little key. "What's in there?" he asked. I looked up too quickly. "Just records," I said. He tilted his head. "You always lock it. Because they're private." He didn't say anything right away. Just looked at me. Like he was reading between the lines I hadn't written down. "Is that where you keep your secrets?" I meant to laugh. I meant to wave it off, dismiss it, change the subject. But instead I said, "Everyone's got a drawer they don't want opened." His eyes flicked to the drawer again, and then back to me, and something in his gaze shifted, from playful to serious, like he saw something break open behind my voice. He didn't ask again. But as he left, he turned to look at me one more time and said, "You don't seem like someone who's boring enough to be just a librarian." And then he walked out the door, leaving me in the silence I used to love, with my heart hammering like I'd just been caught thinking something I shouldn't. I always lock it. Always. The bottom drawer, second from the left. It sticks a little, so you have to jiggle the key, one click left, one right, until it settles with a soft snap. I've done it 100 times. Muscle memory. But yesterday, I didn't. It had been a long day. The copier broke again. A teacher left 30 unmarked returned books on my desk without a word. And my migraine had started its slow, familiar crawl behind my eyes. So I rushed, shoved my journal and the envelope of old letters into the drawer, pushed it closed. But I forgot the key. Left it sitting right on top. Like an invitation. I didn't realize until hours later. The library had emptied. Even the lights in the hall had gone out. I returned to the front desk, keys jingling in my hand, and froze. The drawer was open. Not all the way. Just slightly. A finger's width. But enough. Enough for someone to have seen. I looked around. The room was silent. Still. But on the counter, next to the return books bin, was a single sticky note. Folded once. Neat handwriting. I unfolded it. "You write beautifully." No name. No signature. But I knew. Aiden. He had been the last one in the library. I hadn't even seen him leave. I stared at the note for a long time, then slid it into my journal, right between the pages where I had written just 3 nights ago. Some part of me wants to be noticed, but not by someone who could ruin me. And now he had. He didn't mention the drawer. Not at first. The next time he came in, he acted like everything was the same. Same quiet entrance. Same corner. Same subtle glance over the rim of a book he wasn't reading. But I felt it. The shift. The tension. Like a string pulled tight between us, invisible but humming. He didn't come to the desk that day. Didn't speak. But when he left, he paused at the end of the aisle. Waited until I looked up and said, "Funny, isn't it? How a body can go untouched for years, but still remember what it once felt like to burn." My throat went dry. I knew those words. They weren't his. They were mine. From the third page of my journal, the entry from a February night I'd had too much wine, too little sleep, and too many memories I thought had been buried beneath dust and routine. He said nothing else. Just held my gaze. And walked out the door. I sat there for a long time after, heart in my ears, skin prickling like he'd undressed something inside me without laying a finger on me. He knew. Not just what I wrote, but why. He'd seen the side of me I'd never shown anyone in that school. Not the students. Not the teachers. Not the version of myself I performed behind thick sweaters and quiet smiles. And worse? He hadn't flinched. He hadn't mocked. He'd understood. Which was somehow more terrifying than being exposed. Because now, he wasn't just a boy in my library. He was a mirror. And I was afraid of how much I wanted to see myself in him. I knew he was still there. Even after the last bell rang. Even after the others trickled out with their backpacks and headphones and hollow small talk. He didn't make a sound. Didn't move. But I could feel him. Still in the corner. Still between the shelves I never had to reshelve. Still watching without watching. I should have said something. Should have cleared my throat. Mentioned the time. Reminded him the library closes at 4:30. But I didn't. I turned off the lights at the far end of the room slowly. Not all at once. One switch at a time, until only the glow above my desk and the soft, moody flicker near the backstacks remained. He came forward when the clock hit 4:42. Silent steps. Hands in his pockets. He stood across from me at the desk and said nothing for a full 10 seconds. And then, "You stopped locking the drawer." I swallowed. Felt the key still warm in my pocket. "It's just easier," I said. A lie. He knew it. He stepped closer. Close enough that I smelled the faint trace of something not quite cologne, warm skin, worn cotton, and that soft sharpness of someone too young to understand how tempting he already is. "I didn't mean to read as much as I did," he said. "But once I started, I couldn't stop. I should have been angry. Should have said his name like a warning. Should have drawn a line. Instead I whispered, 'What did you think of what you read?' His answer came slow. Low. 'I think you're lonelier than anyone sees.' He wasn't wrong. But what destroyed me more was the way he said it. Not as an accusation, but like a confession. We didn't move. We didn't touch. But everything between us did. And for the first time I realized he wasn't just seeing me. He was offering himself to be seen too. He asked if he could come around to my side of the desk. His voice low, careful, like he didn't want to startle the quiet between us. "Just for a minute," he said. I didn't answer right away, because I knew it wasn't about the desk. It was about what came after. Still I nodded. He stepped around the end, slipped behind the counter, and sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder in the old creaking chair that never had to share space with anyone before. We didn't touch. But we didn't need to. Every inch between us crackled with something unspoken. I showed him how the checkout system worked. How the barcode scanner could never read the books with faded spines. How I type notes into the student profiles, subtle ones, things like likes books with broken families, or always lingers in the poetry aisle. He looked at me sideways. "Do I have a note?" I smirked. "You haven't checked anything out." "That's not true," he said softly. And I froze. Because he wasn't talking about books anymore. The room felt too still. Too quiet. Too hot. I turned back to my screen, but his voice was still close to my ear. "I read the page where you said no one's looked at you in years." "Not really looked." I inhaled. "Sharp. Aiden. I look at you." His hand brushed mine. Not on purpose, not quite. But it lingered a second too long. Just enough for both of us to feel what would happen if neither of us pulled away. I didn't. And neither did he. And the drawer I kept locked? The one with my journal, my past, my pulse on paper? I swear in that moment, he wasn't reading it anymore. He was writing himself into it. It was the quietest moment of the week. Friday, 5:18 p.m. The halls outside were empty. The clock above the front desk ticked so softly I could hear my own breath over it. He was still sitting beside me, too close now to pretend he hadn't meant to be. I should have stood, should have stepped away, but I didn't. I just let the silence fold over us. And then he reached out. His fingers brushed the inside of my wrist, lightly like he was touching something breakable. I didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't breathe. His hand lingered, warm, open, like an apology he hadn't said out loud yet. Your pulse is fast, he whispered. So is yours. It slipped out before I could catch it. I didn't mean to say it, didn't mean to sound like I'd been listening for it. But the moment stretched, thinned, and neither of us pulled away. He didn't ask. He just turned my hand over gently in his like he was reading a page. Then his thumb traced the small scar near the base of my palm, the one no one ever notices. How'd you get this? He asked. I broke a glass, I said. He nodded. Did it bleed a lot? I looked up at him, and for a moment I didn't see a student. I saw someone who'd bled too. Someone who knew what it meant to cut yourself open by accident, and keep the scar as a reminder that silence always costs something. Yes, I said. It did. He kept holding my hand, and I let him. As maybe I wanted to bleed a little again, just to feel something real under my skin. I opened the drawer for him, not because he asked. He didn't. He hadn't brought it up since the note, since the quote, since the wrist. But I saw the way his eyes flicked toward it whenever he thought I wasn't looking. And I felt the way my hand hovered near the key each time he sat down beside me. So that day, when the sun dipped low across the carpet and made the whole room feel warmer than it should, I pulled out the small silver key, set it in the middle of the desk between us. Didn't say a word. Just waited. He looked at me. Then the key. Are you sure? He asked. And that was the first time I realized. He understood what it meant to open something not meant to be opened. I nodded. He took the key gently, unlocked the drawer like it was sacred, and pulled out the worn leather journal. He didn't flip wildly, didn't skim. He read, carefully, like every page was a breath I'd once held too long. Thought I wasn't supposed to speak. A version of myself I'd buried beneath card catalogs and cardigans in silence. He sat there for a long time. Every now and then he'd glance up, as if checking to see if I was still letting him in. I was. And when he reached the page, the one I'd written last spring, late at night, when I confessed I no longer recognized the woman I saw in the mirror, he paused, ran his finger under the words. I miss being someone that someone else waits for. He looked at me. I wait for you. Just like that. No flairists. No performance. Just truth. And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about loneliness anymore. This was about being seen. Truly. Quietly. Completely. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry. Or kiss him. It was past closing. No announcements. No warnings. Just the kind of stillness that wraps itself around two people and dares them not to move. The journal was still open in his lap, but neither of us were reading. I was sitting in the desk chair. He was standing beside me. Close. Too close. But I didn't tell him to step back. I turned slightly, just enough for my shoulder to graze his hip, and when I did I felt it. His hand. It came down slowly. Not rushed. Not clumsy. Just a warm palm resting near the hollow of my throat. His thumb brushed along the edge of my collarbone, soft like he was mapping something sacred. I didn't flinch, didn't pull away, because he wasn't groping, wasn't grasping. He was learning, tracing the place where my skin thinned and my pulse lived just beneath. You write about hunger, he said. I nodded. It's not always about food. He leaned in, not pressing, not touching lips or hips or anything that might scream too loud. Just close enough to breathe me in. What are you hungry for now? I closed my eyes, because I didn't want to lie. and I didn't want to say it either. But somehow he knew. His hand stayed there, over the part of me that had always been too exposed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to cover it. Not with words. Not with shame. Not even with silence. Just breath. His breath. And mine. Tangled in a space we weren't supposed to share. I don't cry easily. Years of holding it together. Of showing up. Of shelving my feelings next to biographies no one checks out anymore. But that night, I almost did. Because when I took off my glasses, I wasn't trying to see him more clearly. I was letting him see me without the filter. Without the distance. Without the last polite barrier between the woman and the role she'd been playing too long. I'd never done that with anyone in years. Not like this. He stood in front of me. Still. Hands loose at his sides. Face unreadable, not because he was hiding, but because he was trying to be gentle with the moment. I looked up at him. Eyes bare. The weight of every confession still clinging to the air between us. Are you sure? He asked. And I wasn't. Not in the logical moral make a pros and cons list kind of way. But my hands reached for him anyway. And his found my waist like they'd been there in another lifetime. He kissed me. Once. Soft. Slow. Question and its answer all in one breath. It didn't feel like seduction. It felt like permission. To be touched. To be wanted. To be known. We didn't speak as we moved to the small reading nook tucked behind the shelves. Didn't make a sound when fingers slid under fabric and skin met skin. It wasn't frantic. It was quiet. Tender. Dangerous in the way only honesty can be. He didn't ask me to explain why I let it happen. And I didn't ask him if he'd ever look at me the same again. Because I knew the answer. He'd never seen me as just the librarian. And now neither would I.